Hello everyone, welcome back to the homestead. Today Esther is going to share with you how she cans potatoes, and I'm excited to share that I think we're finally to a place of sustainability with our regular potatoes here on the homestead. We've been working towards sustainability with one crop at a time. I think sweet potatoes were the first. They grow amazingly well here in Missouri, and we still have some in our pantry from last year's harvest. It's the middle of summer. We haven't used them a whole lot lately, but those are probably going to go all the way until maybe a month or two before the harvest for this year comes in. So that's pretty exciting. And we've already showed in past videos how we get our own sweet potato slips going. So that's just been a continual process. We use our sweet potatoes from the previous year to get our starts going in January or February, and then those plants go in the ground usually in May. And by September, October, we're harvesting the sweet potatoes, and it's just a continual process that keeps going from year to year. Garlic is another crop that we've been able to get to the point of sustainability on. We've just begun getting our harvest in for this year. I would say garlic's probably one of the easiest to become sustainable in. You just plant the garlic in November, maybe October depending on your climate and your growing zone, and then by June the next year it's ready to harvest. We just lay it out to cure for a few weeks out in our little covered patio area here, so it gets lots of fresh air, but the rain doesn't get to it. Once the heads are dry, then we just chop off the stems and store them in our pantry that is connected to the back side of our house, so it stays fairly cool there. It's a perfect area to store a lot of our crops because it's one of the coolest places through the summer, and then in the winter time it gets very cold and we actually have to heat our stove in that room to keep it from freezing in our pantry in there. So it works out really well. We just started our onion harvest, and onions are not doing great for us this year. We just had a lot of issues. So next year we're going to try and get more sustainable with the onions. We've got a lot to do differently next year, so hopefully we can get to that point with onions soon. But we did have a few little onions that survived all the way through the winter, and actually right as we were pulling up our first onion harvest this season, I still had a few little onions from last year that hadn't started to sprout. They were still nice and firm. We were able to use those, so that's exciting. There's a few other things that I'd say we're sustainable on as well. Winter squash is one of those, although I still do buy seed for those because they cross really easily. So we use some saved seed and some store-bought seed for those. And then there's probably some other things like herbs. We're almost there with tomatoes. But anyway, I want to focus today on the potatoes because I'm super excited about the potatoes this year. We planted 10 beds, and 90% of the potatoes we planted this year were from potatoes that we grew in our own garden last year. So I held out a lot of the small, medium-sized, really good-looking potatoes of all the varieties from last year's harvest. And I kept those actually in our mud room so that they could get light on them. If you keep potatoes in the dark, they'll start to really sprout like crazy. So I actually kept them in a lighter place, and it kept the roots growing really slowly, and they all got really strong, kind of stumpier roots. A few of them grew long, but keeping them in the light really helped with that. And then we planted mostly the smaller whole potatoes, removing all but 2 of the eyes from each potato. We did plant a couple that we had cut in half, and those did really well. And this year we also tried planting a bunch of the just broken off chits from the potatoes. Those are doing okay. It's going to be a lot of smaller potatoes for those, but overall we've got about 200 plus potato plants that we've been harvesting from this year, and the harvest is looking amazing. So praise Yah. I'm really thankful because we've struggled with regular potatoes in the past, and I feel like we're getting to that place of sustainability at last, and it's very exciting. This 5-gallon bucket was part of this morning's harvest. And this year we're putting a shade cloth around our drying rack to try and keep them from turning green, because last year they turned pretty green. So as you can see, the rack is full. We're gonna need to empty our other rack and put shade cloth on that one because there's still a lot of potatoes to get curing on racks. We've got a purple variety. We've got just red potatoes. I'm not sure what variety they are. Originally they were just organic potatoes from the store, so I don't know what variety those are. And then we have the one that's doing best is a golden potato that we got from Azure Standard and something similar from a friend a few years ago. And then we're doing Kennebec as well, and this year they're all doing amazing. And we're trying to not let any of them go to waste. So this year the girls are taking the itty bitty ones and they're getting practice processing baby potatoes and frying those up just for fun. That's helping now too. And then the potatoes that have a little bit of bug damage or are starting to rot on one end or are just really too small to use for regular cooking, those are the ones that Esther is canning. So as we harvest these, we usually try and go out in the mornings when it's a little cooler. As we harvest, she pulls out the ones she's going to use for canning, and then every week she does a little bit of potato canning with the ones that work best for canning. So I'm going to take you inside and she's going to show you that process. Today Esther has Biddle helping out. The first thing they do is rinse the potatoes really well in our well water. And then is the long arduous process of peeling them and cutting them into chunks. We've got a couple jars full here. You're going to do 2 canners worth today, huh? 14 quarts?
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
We cut off all the eyes and bad spots and most of the skin unless it's really clean.
And then after you've got it cut to the size you want, which is about like that size, larger chunks, but not too big.
And then we do another rinse in our Berkey water.
Yep. To make sure they're super, super clean.
So once we have our jars filled, we're gonna add about a teaspoon of salt per quart. And then we fill them up with our Berkey water, leaving about a 3/4 inch head space. We make sure all our jars and lids are sterilized with boiling water. So we've been cutting potatoes for a couple hours now and we're ready to start filling one of the canners. How I do it is I usually just wipe the rim on the jar and put the lid on it and then the ring. And screw it on about finger tight, so not too tight. Now make sure you have an inch or 2 of water above the jars when you put them in the canner. And we're water bath canning them, so it's going to take about 3 hours.
This thing is so, so heavy, so I usually have the guys help. Yay! Good work.
We'll start the time when it's rapidly boiling.
Yeah, and then we just keep it at a low rolling boil. Not too crazy, but definitely want it boiling well, huh?
Mm-hmm.
For 3 hours. It's a long time, but it's worth it. Last winter it was really nice to have the canned potatoes and beans and carrots. It made it super easy to make some quick soups, and so I'm really looking forward to having even more this year. We ran out pretty quickly. Last year was the first year of canning a lot of things. Before that it was just a few jams and jellies and maybe a little tomato sauce, but we're trying to do more and more each year and just learning as we go. Thankfully Esther loves the canning process, and it looks like her siblings, some of them, are getting involved too, so it's wonderful. Well guys, thanks so much for joining us on the homestead again today. Are any of you preserving potatoes or growing potatoes? If so, what's your favorite variety to grow? I'd love to know, so share in the comments below. And before we go, we have a quick thank you to give.
Thank you to Hannah from Georgia for the thoughtful letter and gifts of markers, coloring pages, and homemade card game.
Yeah, the card game was so beautiful.
Alright, that's about all we have for you guys today. As always, thank you to our patrons who make these videos possible. We pray blessings over you and yours, and whatever you do, do it with your whole heart.